All right, I guess we can go ahead and get started and just let people trickle in. So yeah, I'll kick us off here. Those who are attending right now, thanks for coming for day 2 of the conference. So my name is Chintan. I think most of you know who I am by now because I did the thing yesterday, but I'm the founder and CEO of CalcuQuote. And if you don't know what CalcuQuote is, you're at the wrong conference probably by now. CalcuQuote's an RFQ management system, and we do some supply chain software for the electronics industry. So some of you may know, about 6 months ago in October, we did a conference called Accelerate EMS. And during that time, I'd done a session on the future of the EMS industry. And I didn't want to repeat myself or contradict myself with another session on that. So what I thought would be a good idea is to just get some smart people, leaders in the industry, to share their vision of what the electronics industry is. So we try to get diverse opinions and diverse perspectives on that topic. And so today I'm going to play the role of a moderator and let most of these smart people do the talking, or let these smart people do most of the talking. That's what I should have said. And we're going to keep it pretty informal. So I've got some questions prepared, but if you're in the audience, feel free to ask questions. We're going to make this more like a fireside chat. Keep it informal. But to get things started, maybe what we'll start with is if everybody can just go around and introduce themselves and say who you are, what your role is in your company, and if you've gotten a chance to check out any of the sessions so far, or meet anybody during the conference, anything like that. Just share any interesting stories, or if not that, then just any new things you've learned in the last year about how you work better in the new world that you're in right now. So I'll get started with, maybe we'll start at the bottom of my screen or work our way up. So Mike Rankins, you're up.
All right. My name is Mike Rankins. I'm the Director of Supply Chain for DigiKey. I've been on this journey for probably the last 5 years or so, talking about digital connectivity. And, it's kind of been an interesting challenge as we've gone through this, of people wanting to change. And that's why I was kind of happy to get on this and just kind of talk about, some of the challenges that people are having, but also what the future looks like. So I think I'll leave it at that, and then we'll kind of move on because we've got quite a few people to talk. So
sounds good. In that case,
I'm Jordan Jolly, Director of Sales and Implementation at CTech ERP. I've been doing this for 10 years, helping mostly small and mid-sized businesses switch ERP systems, which is a really fun gig, and everybody likes me as the person who helps them switch ERP systems. We've been the system has been around for a really long time, much longer than I've been alive. It is now, as of 2014, web-based. So we've been helping, like I said, manufacturers and distributors, a lot of electronic components, small distributors, manufacturers, PCBA, contract manufacturers, cable assembly companies, high mix, low volume people, move from very, very old technology to the web effectively. So that's what we do. We have a product that is web-based, and it brings tier 1 kind of enterprise level ERP software down to the SMB market at very low prices. So like I said, I've been doing that for 10 years, and it's been quite a ride, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Chintan.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Yashar.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Yashar Shahabi with SourceEngine.com. We have an e-commerce marketplace that we've been up and running for a little over 2 years. We're part of the Sourceability group of company, which is a hybrid distributor for electronic components. I'm the head of digital transformation at Sourceability, and our first step at this was with the SourceEngine.com. Which has been a heck of a journey with a lot of good opportunities on bringing suppliers and getting our customers to transact on our marketplace globally. I'm in the industry for a little over 20 years. With background, I'm an electronics engineer, and been pretty much on every part of the electronic component supply chain, all the way, from logistics, to sales, purchasing, and it would be very much looking forward to have a good discussion here with you guys. And thank you, Chintan, for putting this together. Was also very impressed yesterday with a lot of sessions that I attended to learn from CalcuQuote and what you guys have put together. Thank you.
Thanks, Yasha. Matt, you're
morning,
next on my
everyone.
Hollywood Squares here.
I'm Matt Conda. I'm a software developer that got interested in cybersecurity. Pivoted to help developers build secure applications, and then pivoted again to help organizations build secure organizations with securityprogram.io, which is a platform we build. I think maybe just a tidbit that I'll pick up from yesterday was the Machiavelli quote in the opening keynote. I found that to be just pretty entertaining. And I guess other than that, I'm waiting for Chintan to get another pie.
All right, we're moving on then with Andrew.
My name is Andrew Scheuerman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arch Systems. I was previously building machines, and I partnered up with someone that was building IoT to retrofit old machines. And we're in the business of helping get data from both new and old machines to help advance the performance of EMS factories and give strategic insights about how factories are actually running. We've been working largely with the tier 1 so far. We're installed in 5 of the 10 largest and almost every Flextronics site worldwide, and starting to have a collection of data and insights that we can bring in a very scalable way to the broader EMS industry. In terms of from the conference so far, I think one of my favorite getting Chintan, just kind of seeing you and Steve live together. That was just really nice. Kind of reminder that there's good days coming, and that hopefully this year is off to a good pace here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
Thanks, Chintan.
Michael Kennedy.
Michael Kennedy, I'm the president for global strategic accounts at TTI currently. Been in the distribution world and supply chain for more than 25 years now. And it's been an interesting journey, certainly seeing how everything has evolved. Glad to be part of it. I think it's an exciting industry to be in right now, and I know we're going to get into some of that discussion. As far as my observations, I think these virtual conferences have been one of the interesting things that have happened over the course of the last year, and some good, some bad. I think you're right. I'm looking forward to the time when we're able to all get back together and be in the same room and have some of these discussions live.
Absolutely. Cool. And then last but not least, Gary.
My name's Gary Cantor, Vice President at Aero Electronics. I run the Global Alliance Division, which is essentially EMS sector. Been doing this, I guess I'm the elder statesman on this morning here. I'm in my 38th year, spending the last 20 years focused on EMS and experienced the tremendous growth that we've seen in that manufacturing sector. I'm headquartered at Aero in Denver, Colorado, and as we were talking a little bit earlier, I'm looking forward to getting back on the road and interfacing with suppliers and customers and some of our peers next week. So looking forward to the day today. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. And just as a reminder to the audience, if you do have any questions or anything like that, feel free to just type them into the chat. I think there's a Q&A box. There's several tools available to interact, so just feel free to engage however you'd like. But to kick things off for us, what I'd like to do is just have everybody kind of talk for a couple minutes about what you see in your respective fields, because we do have several different perspectives here in terms of what, software and security and machine software and things like that, and distribution. What do you see as kind of the, let's call it the 5-year vision, or where the trends are for this industry right now, keeping in mind that most of our audience is from the electronics, electronics manufacturing services space. So maybe Gary, we'll start with you, and we can kind of just go through, and feel free if anybody else wants to kind of one up what somebody else said. We can.
Everybody can probably one up me, but just the one, I think that the future for EMS is quite bright. I've been saying that for years, but first of all, if you look at the entire startup sector, no one's moving into manufacturing on day one. They're going to use, they're going to outsource their manufacturing. So just generically, one of the reasons I love to focus on EMS is I just think the future's tremendous for that sector. from a bullet point perspective, I think we're going to continue to see the Asian and Taiwanese EMSs and ODMs look to expand their footprint, particularly into Europe and North America, either through acquisition or greenfield additions. They're obviously looking to expand their customer sector. That's a bit of a competitive threat to the North American-based or traditional European EMSs, but I think that's on the not too distant horizon. And then lastly, look, within our industry, semiconductor companies in particular are going to probably look to continue to consolidate down to a single global distributor. That's where we're focused on making sure that we are that choice, providing the supplier more exposure to a broader customer set, and obviously benefiting our company. I'll stop there, but those are the three things that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, Gary, this is Mike. I agree. And one of the things that I've found too is just in that EMS sector, right, is we've actually taken a pause, right? We've over the year, people have started to say, well, they figured out how to deal with this virus and everything else. Now we're all working from home, but they're all now starting to look at how do I get better? How do I take my hands off the steering wheel? That's what I always tell people is they're so busy holding the steering wheel for price and availability and everything else that they don't see the forest through how do I expand that horizon to digital connectivity, right? So I think these third and fourth tier, I look at coronaviruses, it goes in 4 quadrants. And the fourth one was, let's start changing. How do we evolve? How do we get more efficient? And most of that is through digital connectivity using tools like CalcuQuote. I always say that CalcuQuote is almost like the gateway drug to digital connectivity. And Shintan has done a great job at getting people into it to understand that, right? And so once they see, they can get that big data. So my vision for 5 years is that some of these smaller, tier 3, even the tier 2 guys really start to jump into more. How do you go to that next step? It's not just quoting. How do you go to ordering? How do you go to all of the rest? And in distribution, we can all look at each other and say, we really didn't jump in hard until the last 3 years. We've kind of been there a little bit, but not to the point where people are actually connecting to our computers, right? So, or our machines, so to speak. So that's kind of where I think the 5 years is as well. So.
Yeah, I think, just adding on to that, just being in the same world as Mike and Gary in terms of electronics distribution, there's certainly some trends that we see occurring. Digitization of the supply chain is one of those trends. I think that from an EMS perspective, we'll continue to see the need for better transparency in the supply chain, better resiliency. And the way to do that is really by digitizing and opening up that data for everybody to see. I think there's a couple of others that I look at in particular in the EMS industry. And, one is we see this evolution of in particular the North American and European distributors really leading towards this full service solution for the customer, all the way from concept to end of life, to be honest, and developing their engineering resources, investing in that because they recognize that there's a need for that out in the marketplace. And then I think because of a number of the risk factors, and I know we'll talk a little bit about risks and uncertainties in the EMS later on, but because of all these risk factors that are out there in the business, we're starting to really see a change and a shift in the supply chain strategies and going from, it used to be all globalization into a much more regionalized focus to make sure that they've got a very resilient supply chain that's regionalized, knowing that you've got, whether it's geopolitical or pandemic or other risk factors out there that can really create some big challenges in the supply lines.
Chintan, one of the wanted to get in real quick on this and maybe bring Jordan from the ERP side into the discussion. One of the really interesting things about the adoption by EMSs in terms of the digital services have been, in my observation, smaller guys, that especially the ones that you guys are catering for in CalcuCode, are a lot more receptive to really get it in there and using digital tools, and some of them have really pushed the boundaries, into where you're actually doing that inside their ERP systems, where we've had, in Source Engine, tremendous amount of success by delivering our offers through APIs, and I know you guys have been involved with some of those, and in correspondence with what Michael said, where they're just not getting quotes, but they're also doing order confirmations and all the rest. I would be really keen to understand, from Jordan's perspective in CTEC as an ERP, where they have been exploring any of these opportunities, whether with distributors or with these second tier or third tier, ERP, EMS companies versus the larger guys, not mentioning names, where they're kind of like very stuck in their old ways, and how they do their business, they just continue to do, without really being open, for anything that comes up, whether from the offerings of the distributors or in the digital side, and also even adopting, these conduit systems, like I call it, in between the distributor and the end customer. So is there any exploration, Jordan, you guys are getting in there? Because that's one of the pain points that we have. Because we really want to see more and more customers, that they're more open for these integrations with the APIs, with the likes of us. So it would be really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, for me, we have an interesting perspective. I mean, we deal with accounting software and inventory software, and we're in the trenches of the front office and the back office, and the stuff that's not exactly very sexy. So it's very interesting, and our entire existence and our vision as a company is predicated on the idea that SMB is going to be a major driver of not only innovation, but for us also, consolidation, commoditization. We'll walk through, the front office of a large companies, and they may have really cool stuff out on the floor. They may have a lot of customization, but it's always by necessity very brittle. Extensions and connectors across the stack in the enterprise world is amazing, and everything's usually very automated for the larger kind of tier one customers, but it is very brittle. Which means they're not going to. I don't expect my 5-year vision is not for Arrow to switch their ERP system. That's not who we focus on. Specifically, we focus on the SMB market. For SMB, customization is expensive. A standard set of features for us is never perfect for SMB, but it's infinitely cheaper. So we have a product it's the same product. It's a SaaS, just like this is why we find so much synergy with CalcuQuote. It's a standardized SaaS product that's accessible for SMB, and also it's ERP, so it dictates process. So it's software can be an educator in that way, and standardization is good for SMB, and we think that that's going to bring great efficiency to smaller competitors that frankly need the efficiency to be able to compete. So for us, it's everything. We see a lot of efficiency and improvement for the SMB market. Yeah.
Then maybe I could pick up on that. I think I heard Jordan was talking about APIs, and your talk yesterday with Steve. A lot of people talking about this API ecosystem, and you mentioned that we come from the machine software perspective of EMS. And that same, API ecosystem is very much kind of the trends that we're looking at. And there's kind of two trends that we've been looking at from our perspective. One good and maybe not so good. The good trend is that there are more and more machines that have a rich API that are actually increasingly easy to integrate with. Some of the smartest, most amazing machines are in EMS, like these chip shooters, right? They're unbelievable. Every time I stand in front of one and I watch it move, I'm still impressed, right? And then the second trend, which is kind of scary, is that sometimes it actually looks like there are more legacy machines year after year than there were before. And I think that's because the rate of technology is increasing, and every manufacturer needs to focus their budget on, maybe they have a line that's doing automotive or medical or something, aerospace, and so they need to invest more here, and they can get away not investing here. And so it's almost like we see more of this polarization of the smartest machines, and there are APIs, and then kind of left behind legacy machines increasing as opposed to going away. And that kind of tees into the vision that we've had, which is a vision the whole industry has wanted to have, is that standards, that the machines would get smarter and standards would be there. And so at some point things would just work. And what we've been observing is that's not been happening, and it's not getting close to that point. But the vision that we've had is to be able to build a bridge across those two. And that was part of the name of our company, Arch, to have a solution for all those APIs, the new machines that are coming out, but also to be able to go in and talk to older legacy machines, even if that means retrofitting them with a piece of hardware, to be able to make data available from both old and new machines, now, today, and then be able to leverage that data to do really incredible things. And so that's, I think those are two of the trends that we've been paying attention to. And then one of the things that we've been trying to do, and that vision, we think that definitely in 5 years and maybe more in 3 years from our perspective, that we think it's going to be possible with retrofitting in the picture, not without retrofitting, but with retrofitting, to be able to, any EMS factory in the world, to be able to get rich data from all of the machines that they have, to power some of these analytics that can improve performance, but maybe talk about later, strategic insights, maybe even things related to quoting, supply chain, certainly as well.
Yeah, Andrew, you mentioned retrofitting. A lot of people, obviously, they don't want to go grab a new ERP system or get into that. So retrofitting could be the way to go as you go forward. And, even the ERP companies, they've been slow on the uptake of offering kind of machine-to-machine capabilities, whether it's API or whatever. So obviously that's a nice trend. It's good people are looking at that because they don't know what to do, right? The EMS guys, they just sit there and look at you. I barely have an IT guy, they'll say, and so I need help. And so you're onto something from that perspective. Is people do need help, and how do I take some of these old legacy things and create that bridge or that arch, so to speak?
If I may just add one thing, thanks, Mike, for that. I think also something that a lot of the SaaS and cloud companies are doing are these kind of this idea of fractional experts. You're mentioning, like, somebody may not even have an IT person, and with this kind of SaaS model, I know at our company we talk about fractional data scientists. So like we have a team of data scientists, and you could get kind of 10% of a person focused on your problems. You wouldn't have wanted to hire somebody, much less have the tools that they could use. I think the same is true with IT people, or maybe Yash or Jordan Chenton, et cetera. And this idea of kind of remote and SaaS technology kind of unlocks this ability to have fractional experts that can fill in a lot of those holes. I think that's an exciting trend too.
I can jump in there, Andrew. We end up doing a lot of fractional security work, so that definitely fits. But speaking to the broader point about proliferation of devices and APIs, kind of the other edge of the sword of digital transformation is around attack surface and cybersecurity. So in cybersecurity, I think of attack surface as being like what your risks are and what the avenues that you could be attacked through are. And obviously, as we open up and provide more interactivity, we expose ourselves a little bit. And so a challenge with these transformations is managing cybersecurity. And the other trend I would mention would be to go back to something Michael Kennedy said about transparency in the supply chain. So in cybersecurity, we think about the supply chain as being not just how do you get a part from somewhere, but is the organization you're dealing with reliable? And is the software you're using to handle those transactions reliable? And if you watch the news, you've seen news about SolarWinds and Exchange bugs and a number of high-profile cases around supply chain security. And what we mean in cybersecurity is, did somebody somehow get into a system they shouldn't have through one of your vendors? And that's a major trend, not just for EMS industry players, but also in cybersecurity more broadly, where we see standards like CMMC, we see SOC 2 being a standard that's being pushed out to more and more organizations. It's almost like the prime vendor has to do it, and then their vendors have to do it, and then their vendors have to do it, and it sort of rolls down the chain. And just to give you a very concrete example that I hope might be interesting, we have customers who just replaced all of their video surveillance cameras because of where the software and chips were sourced from. And so that raises, I think, an interesting question for how you differentiate yourselves and your operational risk to a buyer who may be conscious of that. And I'll get out of the way because I'm sure everybody cares more about EMS than security.
No, I think that that actually kind of touches on an interesting point, because you mentioned some of the standards, and I think it aligns with what Andrew and Jordan and Yashar and kind of everybody touched on this a little bit. But as we get into this more transparent and more connected world, one of the things that we also see, right, is that everybody has built these systems to connect, but it's like shouting into the wind a little bit, because if I come up with an API and so do 20 other people, well, they're all going to be structured differently. The data format's going to be different. And so for anybody that wants to use all of these, it's like, well, great, now I have 20 APIs to go connect into. I have 20 ways to interpret inventory information. I have 20 ways to connect my ERP into legacy systems. I have 20 different machines to connect to. It's all these things. And so one of the things that I think, or I'll say it's wishful thinking maybe, but it's that we've kind of crossed the hurdle of, do I want to become a more connected industry? And I think we're getting to the point to say yes. I would say, do I want to speak the same language as everybody in the industry, right? Do I want to be conforming, or do I want to, so it's a standards battle almost, to say, what will be the standard for how you display inventory availability and pricing information, or how will you standard purchase orders? And in the 90s, that was EDI. We became kind of a standard, and with APIs, there's not really a standard way of doing that yet, but that could definitely be one of the things. Yes, I see there's some engagement here in the chat as well. So I did ask a question. It says we're expanding our connections by API at the moment. We're looking at security and integrity. So I know Matt, you and I have had these kind of. Oh, apparently my audio is cutting out in my video. Can you hear and see me? Okay?
You're a little low, you're a little in and out on the voice, but we can still hear you. We just can't see you, which that's no problem.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, if you lose me completely, just carry on without me, I guess.
All right, we will.
Okay. What I was going to say is, I know, Matt, I'll start with you, and then whoever else wants to chime in. But one of the things that comes up is, as we start talking about connectivity and things like that, there's all kinds of concerns that come up, both from large enterprises as well as SMBs, where if I have, if I have barely one IT person in-house or whatever, like, I still need that assurance that whatever software vendor I picked is going to maintain my data for me, make sure that it's not being abused, make sure it's not being shared, make sure that all proper security protocols are being followed. What's your take on that? And I'll say more broadly, how does that affect cloud services, SaaS services, as well as how you connect with your supply chain partners and things like that in a safe way?
I don't know that I have a great answer, other than we leverage security standards to be able to make sure we have a broad and comprehensive, maybe too strong a word, but like a broad view of what you need to do from a security perspective, so that we're following best practices. There's no, I mean, I hate to be a truth teller or something, but there's no one way to secure your business. And I could tell you a million things, and you could spend a year and you might miss the thing that really mattered. And so I think the most important thing is to start with a sort of holistic point of view, prioritize, and do it continuously over time, as opposed to thinking that you can buy one tool and solve a problem, or take one action and that's going to protect you. Touching on your cloud question, there's a very interesting story going on right now in cybersecurity, where the Department of Justice just authorized the FBI to basically attack Exchange servers that are owned by people that have already been hacked. So there was a bug in Exchange, and almost 100,000 Exchange servers got hacked by someone or teams of people elsewhere in the world, let's say, right? And it's so bad and people don't know how to fix it that the Department of Justice said it's okay for the FBI to go fix it for them. Right? And they can do that because there's a bug that gives the FBI like basically remote access to that machine. So this should trigger a bunch of alarm bells for a variety of reasons. But from a cloud perspective, the sort of narrative in the cybersecurity world is, hey, if you were using Exchange in O365 in the cloud, you weren't impacted. And it was Microsoft's job to patch all these Exchange servers. And so, again, I don't want to minimize the issue, but there are risks with moving to cloud services, but there are also significant benefits to that as well.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
If this experience is shared, but when I first started at this company, maybe 50% of the folks I talked to expressed nervousness about the cloud. And to this day, we offer, if you want to put our software on a resident, local server, that's fine, go for it, to cater to those people. But and again, maybe it's subjective. I hear almost none at this point, 10 years later. And so it seems like the trust, maybe it's, a culture thing. And maybe, again, that's just, local or subjective, but it seems like culturally we have gotten to the point where, yeah, I might trust somebody like Google or Amazon or Microsoft with security over my local IT team. That's at least been my experience, which is good, I think, because I think it's accurate of reality. So I don't know if anybody else has had that similar kind of trajectory over the past 10 years, but it has been interesting.
I think, Chintan, I don't know if you guys have ever felt that, or Jordan, in Europe, we hear more about, can we receive your service on a desktop application versus a browser level application? And I think that's like a lot more eased up here in the United States, but in Europe, you always, get to hear that, and the second thing on the security side or cloud services is that, because of the spat between Europe and United States, the last couple of years, we've had customers, asking us, oh, you guys using Amazon or, American cloud services company versus the local European ones, where they're like, we've had even some customers picking up on our terms and conditions, on sourceengine.com, saying that, well, as well as the fact that we don't feel comfortable, uploading our bill of materials, into a SaaS-based, a product, a software product. Also, we're not very comfortable that, that is obviously being stored, with a company that is not European and it's American. So those are the two things that, we've faced. And it's obviously, as an American company, for us, it sounds a little bit strange, but, we feel that, all of those, are a lot more easier in America.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna thanks for covering that topic. I thought we did a pretty thorough job on that, but of course there's a lot more nuance to it as we get into the weeds of how you deal with bringing data together and things like that. I wanted to switch gears here a little bit and talk about just volatility, uncertainty in the marketplace. So I know one of the problems that's plagued the EMS industry is uncertainty in various forms, right? Whether it's not having inventory available, not being able to predict things like supply chain disruptions, COVID, like it's become increasingly, I'll say, on the forefront of supply chain managers' minds. Could you speak to what you guys see with disruptions in whether it's supply chain or operations, or just what disrupts a business and how you see that being dealt with? And I'll let, we haven't heard from Gary or Michael in a minute, so if one of you guys wants to kick us off.
Michael, go ahead, I'll follow you. But
Sure, thanks, Gary. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of risk factors that can impact not only the EMS customers, but honestly the OEM customers as well. And talked a little bit earlier about those risk factors could be anything from geopolitical challenges that happen. Most recently, you've seen issues with a ship blocking the Suez Canal that cut off supply lines for a number of days, and that had impact across many industries. If we want to drill it into kind of the electronics world and electronic components, even things, lead time and sourceability, the having single source product on the bills of material, all of those can contribute to risk factors, particularly in a market like we are experiencing right now, where there's a lot of supply chain constraint. We have lead times that are stretching out significantly. We have application that is starting to occur. And I think all of those combined really start to lead toward what are the solutions. And there's no one silver bullet. And that's the biggest issue. From our company's perspective, really for what TTI reinforces with our customers, number one is we want to have deep relationships with our customers. We want to understand their goals. We want to make sure that we're working down the same page together. And we do, one of the things that we certainly believe in is an investment in inventory. That's the buffer that helps during those breaks in the supply chain. Having that inventory will enable our customers to keep their supply lines running until there's a recovery that can be had. That's really where I'll hand off to Gary and get his thoughts.
But first of all, I'm sure everybody in the conference right now is well aware of what's going on, in terms of, in particular, the semiconductor sector and the wafer shortages, et cetera. But one thing's for sure, uncertainty and volatility is always going to be around. It certainly fluctuates based on product cycles, et cetera. But alluded to, be it an earthquake in Taiwan or a flood in Thailand or a ship blocks the canal, there are unforeseen circumstances that could create blips in the industry. And obviously the one that we're living through now is 15 months ago, as this pandemic began and industries began to shut down and demand fell off a cliff. It's caused a tremendous ripple effect, a year later in semiconductor demand. So, Michael alluded to this. The reality is that in terms of keeping your supply chain running and your manufacturing lines running, there are a number of factors that are important, but certainly inventory availability is critical. Our industry, I'll just speak for Aero, we're the world's largest, supply chain provider in the industry, $30 billion. We have the largest inventory in the world, the most expansive and largest modern warehouses in the world, significant engineering resources, digital resources, et cetera. And I'm trying to create confidence in here that, you're looking for partners that can be the absolute best insurance policy, if that's the right term, to try to create a picture, for your supply chain. So anyway, somebody else, but I think that our sector is here to try to create as linear, smooth out the bumps in the road as possible. And we're certainly going to continue to see, blips in this roller coaster of cycle demand.
Yeah, Gary, I agree. I mean, obviously, you want to give them that clearest comfort level that, excuse me, that you have them covered, right? And that's the goal in this whole supply chain arena. There's a line in a movie, the hits just keep on coming. But we start thinking about fires. There's been 3 major fires at different semiconductor plants right over the years and over this past year. And then normal shipping products over the ocean usually take 6 to 8 weeks. Now it's 6 to 8 weeks while it sits in the port of Los Angeles, right, before it even gets through customs. And so those challenges are making it even harder for for companies, even for us, right? We consider ourselves pretty inventory driven as a company, but you have to make sure that you've got the pipeline, continue to pipeline it, and continue to show that material is available. And that's the one thing that I do deal with, right? When I deal with customers from a supply chain perspective, is just giving them that assurance of supply, right? And you hit the nail on the head, Gary, to say if you give them that feeling that they're covered, they're good. And then what we're talking about here are what are the other tools to help them when they can't find it, right? And to show them that big data, to show them who's carrying inventory around the world, so that, because only so many parts will be in some type of program or in some type of somebody's inventory, but finding that inventory is the right thing. And how do you find it? So I think that's the bigger challenge for the EMS companies that are on this call is, okay, I've got my major parts set up, aligned up. I feel good about my supply chain. What about the rest? And how do I find them? How do I see that inventory around the world? I think that's obviously one of the benefits as we start to talk about digital connectivity too.
Yeah, and I think if we think about it from the perspective of an EMS buyer, right? Because I think there's macro level disruptions that all three of you kind of hinted at, but there's also what I as an individual buyer can do. And one of the things that we see is everybody's so focused on transaction processing, data entry, manual looking up, things like that. How do you shift that mindset to say, you want a supply chain partner, you want somebody that can connect with you and bring you the information when you need it, so you're wasting less time doing these manual things and more time on these strategic decisions and removing the risk from your supply chain and things like that. What do you guys see in those areas?
Yeah, I hate to say it. I mean, it has to be a conscious decision. You have to actually get above the noise and make a conscious decision strategically that you're going to set up a more robust supply chain and partner with the right companies that would enable that. And part of that is understanding from your supply chain goals as a company, what are the things that are key. I think during the pandemic, there's been a little bit more the recognition there is a trade-off between resiliency and cost, and you have to be willing to make some of those trade-offs. And Barry talked about selecting the right partners, the partners that have the capabilities to be able to bring transparency, to be able to bring inventory, all of those things that matter in terms of protecting against disruption, and just going out and proactively engaging the company, because the disruptions are not going to get less. They're becoming more frequent. They're becoming more prolonged, and companies do absolutely need to be thinking about how they manage that.
I just Michael said that the phrase is open the kimono. The reality is many companies get consumed with the tactical, transactional, their 8-to-5 job and aren't focused as a company on achieving the vision of the CEO or the executive committee of their company. I think that, I think I could speak for everybody, but when the supplier understands what the vision is, for the company, and take 5 minutes to explain what your CEO is trying to head to your company in the next 1, 3, 5 years, you bring the supplier into the partnership, a partnership is developed, and you make it much easier for you to mutually achieve those objectives and goals. And the reality is, I say this somewhat generically, but EMS is a tough business. It's a very tough business. Profit margins can be very tight, and sometimes bad habits occur where it's all about the penny and PPV. Forget about the bigger picture. So I think if you share, you open up the kimono, and let those strategic suppliers in to understand where you're trying to get, down the road, I think you'll find your success factors go way up.
Yeah, I think our industry, in terms of the supply chain during the normal times is awfully complicated, right? And I think, no one distributor ever has the solution because, nobody has an unlimited line card catering for every manufacturer and every product category, right? And as an EMS, you're going to get a line down even during normal time if you're not getting, just one component out of the many items in your bill of material. So when extended circumstances like this, occur, which, where we are in Source Engine and Sourceability, we feel that it's the most allocated market that, we have seen collectively in the last 20 years, then it kind of like, puts all of the problems, especially, for an EMS that is awfully dependent on a, just-in-time delivery, at least a tier 2, tier 3 are very much like that, into a steroid. And, in our side, we've been trying to give all the customers a good visibility of, any component that is possible from around the world in sourceengine.com, where they're able to see that availability, whether through the API or by coming to the site or delivering basically our offers to, CalcuCode or any other system out there, or even into the ERPs as we have some integration. But we're also dependent on, that suppliers, on time, update of the data, in our system. And even with the APIs, we see delays and inaccuracies, and all the rest, so it just makes it awfully complicated, and puts it into a different level, where you just get to realize, that an e-commerce business or an online business, it's in our world of a B2B for electronic component supply chain is unlike anything else out there, right? So that has been, let's say the biggest challenge that we've had, together with our EMS partners, since the beginning of this year.
Good. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how we apply this vision, right? And one of the things that I see is of the hundreds of EMS companies that we work with, one of the things that we see is you can usually find like what is the success story, right? Like who is the ideal person or company that is representing what the future is going to look like. And so I'd be curious to see if we can kind of go around the circle as part of our closing thoughts, talk about, share your closing thoughts, but also I'd be curious to see if you have an example of, here's the customer on a hill, right? Like here's the one that is worth looking up to. And we don't have to name names, we can keep it generic that way, but I'd be curious to see what you define as a success story of somebody that's representing where the industry vision is going. And maybe we can start with, we'll start with Jordan. We haven't started with Jordan in a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I'm at liberty to name names, so I'll keep it anonymous.
Yeah. We'll keep it generic because we don't have permission to do that. But just
so I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, there's a cable assembly company, a startup, that opted to begin their business on an ERP platform, which is pretty unusual, and says something about the experience of their ownership and management, beginning with that, not going to QuickBooks or something like that, which is what most people do, because you solve the most immediate need. This company decided to start with ERP and build their company from literally 2 employees up to I think 100 currently. It's been a couple of years, and they service mostly a tier 2 supplier. But they have been just watching their commitment to doing the thing that seems more difficult for a small business at first, and then watching how that has benefited them as they've grown. And the main thing is how nimble they've been able to be. So because they selected an ERP that was, modernized, with it's funny, you'd think it would be more common in the ERP space. It's not. But one that has, a full set of modern, flexible, easy APIs. And they've been able to when they want to do something, they can do it. And they're extremely nimble and very fast. So there's a number of things that they've been able to do. One of which was CalcuQuote. They found a best of breed, price search engine. And they were able to say, hey, can this talk to our ERP? Like, yeah, which again, that's just not something that a lot of our, most of our competitors can say. It's usually much more difficult to achieve things. Hey, can we go mobile with a mobile unit? Can we have our employees connect remotely? Anything that they've wanted to do as a business strategically, they've been able to do relatively instantly because they built their core, the boring core of the business, the fundamental pieces on modern technology. And so it has equipped them to just be able to do things very quickly and very affordably whenever they want. So that's been amazing. And it all, kind of hinged around that initial strategic decision to, to go to an enterprise scale platform, even as a very, very tiny startup entity. So that was pretty neat.
Mike Rankins, you're up on my list next if you want to go next.
I've got a couple up on the hill, but I actually use them. So in my role, you think I'm going to be talking about supply chain solutions. I'm talking more about digital connectivity than supply chain solutions these days. That's the bigger solution these days. So what I try to do to get whet their appetite on connectivity is I talk about two companies, but I'll give you the one that is kind of a little bit more unique than the one everybody talks about. So this company, after I talked to them, they went out and they hired somebody like a Jordan, where they looked at their ERP system, and they built some tools into their ERP system so that when the buyer is looking for a part, and she scrolls over that part requirements, the API opens up. It's I don't know if it is an API, but some type of digital connectivity into the 4 or 5 distributors. She's able to see the instant availability of inventory, and then click on the one and price, and click on the one she wants, and it adds it to the PO and pushes it out the door. So, I mean, I use that as a great example of there's tools out there that can still give them the ability to do, Gary, you said it best, penny pinching, do whatever they need to do on their side, right? Because it's always price, but it gives them the ability to kind of automate that process. So, and that they see I like the fact that when I tell people about it, they see a real life example of it's out there. Somebody's doing it, right? So, there's other ones that are doing it in the middle of the night, right? So they're going out and they're checking price and availability and then auto creating the orders. And the punchline to that story, when I talk about that other customer that's doing it in the middle of the night, is that process takes about 6 seconds. So, and they're auto placing some purchase orders. So you give them those two perspectives to show them, and that usually at least the juices, right, to start talking about it. And that kind of jazzes me up when we start getting into that. So I've been in meetings with presidents of companies that it's hold on a minute, let me get my IT guy in here. I need to have him hear this. And that's when you've got people, they understand it, right?
Yep. Michael, I want to comment on that, because that's really interesting. Because even the different personas in our industry, in the supply chain industry, buyer, engineer, designers, they're all in their own ecosystems, right? They're never going to get out of it, right? They're in an EDA tool, in a CAD tool, a PLM tool, a purchasing tool like CalcuCode, or an ERP tool like CTech. So they're never going to come out of it. They're stuck there. It's utmost important to have robust APIs. If you want to call that in the digital connectivity, and most of the time an IT guy is not going to cut it. No offense to any IT guy, if it's present here. So that's where we find things getting very complicated, and it's all about the modern software development, the modern APIs, and it really comes to have these companies make that decision, to really invest in that digital transformation, and have they really understood, that the APIs, the connectivity, across various different systems in a company, in order to give that, 100% easy flow, from end to end. Whether you're in an EMS company, you have a designer, you have an engineer, you have a buyer, you have a logistics manager, or all of these, different, ecosystems. Which, by the way, they've all been rolled out with their own flavor, right? Just because you happen to have a Oracle, for example, in one company, it doesn't mean that you're going to have the exact API endpoint with another Oracle in another company, because they've had their own workflow process, so that they've implemented exactly in their own flavor, right? But how do these modern APIs, through existing maybe digital transformation or modern IT department in these companies, are connecting these bits and pieces together in order to give that, ease of flow end to end across the entire company. And I do see a lot of, especially in the tier 2, tier 3 EMS companies, a lot of very, let's say, creative companies that they've gotten that right. And as you mentioned, they're able to query APIs all over the place, within a couple of seconds, place orders, get order confirmations, and we've had this experience with Calculago with some companies, and that definitely seems to be the future, that is coming through.
Absolutely. Yeah, you made one quick
So we got
comment
about
about that.
5 minutes.
You talked about that first example I gave is their IT guy actually he knew nothing at that point. He went off and they got like 2 other companies that came in and did it for him. But
Right.
he was an owner of a company. It was only a small $25 million CM, but he saw the vision. And I look at that and I tell people, my friends in the industry, I have one friend, he's a VP over at a local contract manufacturer. He's like, no, you're telling stories. I'm telling you that you can call him yourself and you can see he had the vision as an owner that he needed to be there. Right. So that's why I use it as an example, because there's a guy he wasn't big, but he knew that he needed to bring his company to that next level.
If anybody watching that anecdote you gave, Michael, because CalcuQuote exists, we've been able to embed some of their tools into our ERP to be able to do exactly the anecdote you just described. So if anybody watching wants to actually see that happen with a web-based ERP tool, out of the box, ready to go, like that's a shining example of the type of thing that modern innovation in a web-based system where a modern company like CQ and a modern company like CTech, that working together. I mean, you can bring that kind of power to the market. Pretty amazing.
Chintan, I've got a quick anecdote. Maybe I can share in the remaining time. We talked earlier about experts and like companies that maybe don't even have an IT person. All these SaaS cloud tools let you get an expert from the outside. But something else that's really interesting is experts inside of existing EMS companies being able to be leveraged further. One of the challenges we often find is sites like, say, an EMS that maybe has 2-3 sites. Maybe they have a site that lost an expert, but they're still very territorial and they don't necessarily want people helping on their turf. Well, we have one customer who had a factory that sadly had to close in Europe, but they have another factory in Europe, factory in Mexico, factory in the US, and they had the vision to keep on a lot of that team in that factory that closed and kind of force them to be able to, because they were some top experts, but they didn't actually move them to the other factories. They had them start working remotely, even though they didn't necessarily have all the technologies yet, and being a support team to these other factories. And when we came in and started working with them, unlike a lot of our other customers, we were like, this is so awesome. We wish every company had this, because now we have these remote tools where they can see in and do incredible things in the factory. And there were already these top trained people that were in a position with more trust for these factories to kind of leverage insights across them. That's something that we rarely see. Rarely does such a team exist. And if a factory did close, those people often, left the company. So I thought that was a cool example to just highlight here.
I think, in my perspective,
We've got about 2 minutes left here. So
I don't know that we have a perfect. We have a lot of customers that do components very well, and I haven't yet found the unicorn that has put all of it together yet. But I kind of look at 4 things. I think that the company, you have to have a vision. You have to be willing to invest in the tools and technology. You need to develop the right partnerships, and then you need to execute and stay the course. And companies that do those things well tend, in my eyes, to be the ones that have been successful.
and Gary, and then Matt, and I think that'll take us an hour.
I have a number of them, but I'll simplify because they tend to repetitively look the same. And what I alluded to earlier, many of the EMSs on here have customers that are very challenging to them. They could be very price challenging, but we have a large OEM that using 3 EMSs, across multiple locations, and historically that OEM's price, and by going into the OEM together with the EMS, explaining the value proposition, all of the tools available, et cetera. And I realize we're short on time, so the end of the story is that the OEM agreed to fund the supply chain program, which the EMS could not afford to do. Okay, and then over about a 3-year period, what started with 4 ASICs, which the semiconductor guy is not going to do a supply chain, and then it expanded one technology after another, and it's now thousands of parts, where the OEM appreciates funding it, taking the financial burden off of, the EMS. So the moral of the story is utilize your partners, your suppliers to help you, expand your solutions, to the OEM.
And Matt, like very short, because we're already
I
at
can
the 10
actually just defer. Our most successful customers just sail through audits and it's a non-event. So that's about as exciting as it gets for us. But if you put a program in place with securityprogram.io, that's a way to do that.
Well, thank you guys very much. Appreciate all of you. I know some of you had to wake up quite early for this, so appreciate you guys getting on the call. Hopefully you can stick around for a little bit if there is anybody that wants to network with you or have follow-up questions, things like that. And there will not be any other pies, and I'm saying that for the benefit of the team that's listening here at CalcuQuote. But thank you all for joining, and hopefully you get to check out the rest of the conference. I know there's some sessions starting here as well related to quoting best practices and a couple other things. So feel free to check those out as well.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye everyone.